Marcus Johnson had always believed in doing what was right, no matter how small the act seemed. A hard-working baggage handler at Skyline Airlines, Marcus took pride in his job. He wasn't just there to load luggage onto planes or guide passengers through crowded terminals. He saw himself as someone who could make people's travel experiences a little brighter. With his warm smile and calm demeanor, Marcus stood out among the bustling chaos of the airport. One rainy afternoon, the terminal buzzed with frustration. Flights were delayed due to severe weather, and passengers milled about, some pacing anxiously, while others sat slumped in chairs glued to their phones for updates. Amidst the commotion, Marcus noticed an elderly woman sitting quietly near Gate 17. She was in a wheelchair, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a small handbag on her lap. Her face showed a mix of exhaustion and worry, but what caught Marcus's attention most was the difficulty she seemed to be having navigating the crowded space. The airline staff assigned to assist disabled passengers hadn't arrived yet, likely overwhelmed by the surge of delays throughout the terminal. Without hesitation, Marcus approached her. "Ma'am," he said gently, bending down so he could meet her eyes. "Can I help you get to your gate?" The woman looked up, startled. At first, then visibly relaxed when she saw the kindness in Marcus's expression. "Oh, thank you, young man," she replied softly. "I'm trying to board Flight 234, but it's been such a long day." Marcus nodded reassuringly. "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything." Carefully, he pushed her wheelchair toward the boarding area, making sure to avoid puddles from the rain dripping through the open doors outside. Along the way, he struck up light conversation, asking if she needed water or anything else to feel more comfortable. The woman smiled faintly, clearly grateful for his presence. When they reached the jet bridge, however, things took a turn. An impatient supervisor, Mr. Grayson, appeared out of nowhere. His sharp tone cut through the air like a knife. "What are you doing here, Marcus? You're supposed to be handling bags, not escorting passengers." Marcus tried to explain. "Sir, this passenger needed assistance and no one else was available." "I don't care," Grayson snapped, cutting him off. "Stick to your duties, that's what we pay you for." Feeling a pang of frustration but unwilling to argue, Marcus stepped aside. Yet as he watched another employee clumsily attempt to push the wheelchair forward, nearly bumping into a cart full of luggage, Marcus couldn't stay silent. "Excuse me," he interjected firmly. "Let me finish helping her. She deserves better than that." Grayson glared at him, his jaw tightening. "Fine. Do what you want. But don't come crying when this affects your job." Though unsettled by the exchange, Marcus focused on ensuring the elderly woman boarded safely. As she finally settled into her seat, she reached out to touch his arm. "Thank you," she whispered sincerely. "You've restored my faith in humanity today." But little did Marcus know, his simple act of kindness would soon spiral into something far greater and far more challenging than he ever anticipated. This opening sets the stage for the emotional journey ahead, introducing Marcus as a compassionate character while hinting at the conflict brewing around him. It keeps readers engaged by blending relatable human emotions with tension-building moments. The next morning, Marcus arrived at work with a sense of unease lingering in his chest. He had replayed the events of the previous day over and over in his mind, wondering if he should have handled things differently. But deep down, he knew he had done nothing wrong. Helping that elderly woman wasn't just part of being human. It was something anyone would do if they saw someone in need. As he clocked in for his shift, Marcus noticed an unusual tension in the air. Usually, the early hours were quiet, filled only with the hum of conveyor belts and distant chatter among co-workers. Today, however, whispers echoed through the baggage handling area. Some employees avoided eye contact when they passed him, while others gave him sympathetic glances. Something was clearly off. When Marcus approached his supervisor, Mr. Grayson, to receive his assignment for the day, the man's face hardened into a scowl. "Not so fast, Johnson," he barked, gesturing toward the office behind him. "You've got a meeting with HR." Confused and growing increasingly anxious, Marcus followed Grayson into the small, dimly lit room. There, seated behind a cluttered desk, was Ms. Carter, the head of human resources. Her expression was unreadable as she motioned for Marcus to sit down. "Marcus," she began, her tone clipped and formal. "We've received reports about your conduct yesterday during Flight 234's boarding process." Marcus blinked, caught off guard. "Conduct? I was just helping a passenger who needed assistance." Ms. Carter exchanged a glance with Grayson before continuing. "According to protocol, your primary responsibility is to handle baggage operations. Leaving your post without permission disrupted workflow and caused delays. But no one else was available to help her," Marcus protested, his voice rising slightly. "She was struggling and I couldn't stand by and do nothing." "Isn't customer service part of our job too?" Grayson leaned forward, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "That's not how it works around here. We have procedures for a reason, and stepping outside those lines isn't acceptable." Marcus felt anger bubbling beneath the surface, but he forced himself to stay calm. "So what happens now?" he asked, already fearing the answer. Ms. Carter sighed, shuffling papers on her desk. "After reviewing the situation, we've decided to terminate your employment with Skyline Airlines. Effective immediately." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. For a moment he couldn't breathe. His mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. All because he'd tried to help someone? It didn't make sense. "I don't understand," Marcus said finally, his voice trembling. "I didn't break any laws or harm anyone. I thought this company cared about its passengers." "This isn't personal, Marcus," Ms. Carter replied, though her tone lacked conviction. "It's about maintaining order and following rules." Fighting back tears, Marcus stood up, feeling both defeated and furious. As he left the office, his co-workers watched silently, their faces reflecting a mix of pity and fear. Word spread quickly throughout the terminal, and soon everyone knew what had happened. Later that evening, sitting alone in his apartment, Marcus replayed the day's events in his head. How could doing the right thing cost him his livelihood? He thought about the elderly woman, the gratitude in her eyes, and wondered if she even realized the price he'd paid for helping her. But unknown to Marcus, news of his firing was spreading beyond the confines of the airport. Social media posts from fellow employees and eyewitnesses began circulating online, sparking outrage among travelers and advocates alike. One particular message stood out. "A good man lost his job today because he showed compassion. This can't be the end of the story." And indeed it wasn't. Somewhere far away, someone powerful was watching and listening. This section builds emotional tension by highlighting the injustice Marcus faces while planting seeds for future developments. Readers are drawn deeper into the narrative, rooting for justice to prevail. By the next morning, Marcus's story had spread far beyond the walls of Skyline Airlines. What started as quiet whispers among co-workers quickly turned into a tidal wave of public outrage. A passenger who had witnessed Marcus helping the elderly woman posted about the incident on social media, attaching photos she'd taken of him that day. Her caption read, "This man was fired for showing kindness. Is this really how we treat people who go above and beyond?" The post went viral almost instantly. Thousands of users shared it, adding their own comments expressing disbelief and anger. Some praised Marcus's selflessness, calling him a hero. Others criticized Skyline Airlines, accusing the company of valuing rigid rules over human compassion. Hashtags like Justice for Marcus and Compassion Over Policy began trending across platforms. At first, Marcus didn't realize what was happening. He spent the day applying for new jobs, trying to stay optimistic despite the weight of his sudden unemployment. But when he finally checked his phone later that evening, he was stunned. His notifications were flooded with messages from strangers, people thanking him, offering support, and even sharing stories of times they'd been helped by someone like him. One message stood out in particular. It came from an elderly woman named Mrs. Evelyn Harper, the very same passenger Marcus had assisted at the airport. Her words brought tears to his eyes. "Dear Marcus, I only learned today what happened to you because of me. Please know that your kindness meant more to me than I can ever express. You're a good man, and the world needs more people like you." As days passed, the attention grew even stronger. Local news outlets picked up the story, interviewing passengers who had seen Marcus's act of kindness firsthand. One reporter described him as the face of humanity in an increasingly cold world. Even celebrities joined the conversation, using their platforms to call for accountability from Skyline Airlines. But not everyone reacted positively. Some online trolls accused Marcus of exaggerating the situation or seeking attention. Others defended the airline, claiming that breaking protocol was unacceptable regardless of the circumstances. These negative voices weighed heavily on Marcus, making him question whether speaking out might have been a mistake. Despite the backlash, Marcus found solace in the overwhelming support he received. Friends, family, and even former co-workers reached out to offer encouragement. One colleague, Lisa, told him privately, "You did nothing wrong, Marcus. If anything, you reminded us all why we chose this line of work, to help people." Meanwhile, behind closed doors, Skyline Airlines executives scrambled to address the growing crisis. Complaints poured in from customers threatening to boycott the airline, while shareholders demanded answers. The pressure mounted until it reached the desk of Richard Langley, the CEO of Skyline Airlines, a man known for his no-nonsense approach, but also his sharp instincts when it came to protecting the company's reputation. Richard reviewed the reports about Marcus's firing, along with screenshots of the viral posts and articles criticizing the decision. As he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples thoughtfully, he realized this wasn't just a PR issue. It was a test of the values the airline claimed to uphold. That evening, Richard made a decision. He instructed his assistant to arrange a private meeting with Marcus Johnson. "Tell him it's urgent," Richard said firmly, "and make sure nobody else knows about it." When Marcus received the call inviting him to meet with the CEO, he felt a mix of emotions: hope, fear, and curiosity. Why would the head of the entire airline want to speak with him? Was this another attempt to silence him? Or could it be something more? Little did Marcus know, this meeting would change everything, not just for him but for Skyline Airlines as well. This section amplifies the emotional stakes by showcasing the power of community support while introducing tension around the CEO's involvement. Readers remain engaged, eager to see how the story unfolds. The day of the meeting arrived, and Marcus couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in his stomach. He dressed carefully, choosing a crisp button-down shirt and slacks to make a good impression. Despite his nerves, he reminded himself why he was there, to stand up for what was right, no matter how intimidating the situation might be. When Marcus entered Skyline Airlines' corporate headquarters, he felt out of place. The sleek glass building stood in stark contrast to the bustling chaos of the airport, where he'd spent so many years working. As he approached the front desk, a receptionist greeted him with a polite smile and escorted him to a private waiting area near the CEO's office. Minutes ticked by slowly, each one stretching longer than the last. Finally, the heavy wooden door opened and Richard Langley stepped out. Tall and impeccably dressed, Richard exuded authority, but his expression was unreadable as he extended a hand toward Marcus. "Thank you for coming," he said in a measured tone. "Please come inside." Marcus nodded, trying to mask his anxiety as he followed Richard into the spacious office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline, but Marcus barely noticed. His focus was entirely on the man seated across from him. Richard gestured for Marcus to sit before leaning forward slightly, folding his hands on the desk. "I'll get straight to the point," he began. "Your story has caused quite a stir, not just within our company but globally. People are watching closely to see how we respond." Marcus swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. "Sir, all I did was help someone who needed it. I never imagined this would happen." Richard studied him for a moment, his sharp eyes assessing every detail. "You're aware that following protocol is essential in any organization. It ensures safety, efficiency, and consistency. By stepping outside those boundaries, you disrupted operations and set a precedent others might follow." "I understand that," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite his racing heart. But isn't there room for flexibility when it comes to helping people? Shouldn't compassion take priority over rigid rules? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Richard leaned back in his chair, considering Marcus's words. After a long pause, he spoke again. Let me ask you something, Mr. Johnson. If you were given the chance to do things differently, knowing the consequences now, would you still have helped that passenger? Without hesitation, Marcus met the CEO's gaze. Yes, sir. Every time. Richard didn't respond immediately. Instead, he picked up a folder from his desk and flipped through its contents. Inside were screenshots of social media posts, news articles, and customer feedback, all centered around Marcus's firing. The sheer volume of public support was undeniable. Do you know what's at stake here? Richard asked finally. This isn't just about you or even Skyline Airlines. It's about setting an example for employees, passengers, and the world. Companies like ours are judged not only by their profits, but also by their values, Marcus nodded, sensing the weight of the moment. I've always believed that true leadership means doing what's right even when it's hard. That's why I helped Mrs. Harper. And honestly, I think most people agree with me. Richard's lips twitched almost imperceptibly as if suppressing a smile. You're not wrong, he admitted. In fact, your actions have sparked a much-needed conversation within our company. We've received thousands of messages from customers demanding accountability and change. For the first time since entering the room, Marcus allowed himself a flicker of hope. So, what happens now? Richard stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. That depends on you, Mr. Johnson. But rest assured, this isn't over. Not for you, and certainly not for Skyline Airlines. As Marcus left the office, his mind raced with possibilities. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain. The world was watching. This section builds suspense by exploring the dynamic between Marcus and the CEO while hinting at potential resolutions. Readers remain invested, eager to discover how the story will unfold. As Marcus stepped out of the corporate headquarters, he felt a strange mix of relief and uncertainty. The CEO's words had left him with more questions than answers. What did Richard Langley mean when he said, "This isn't over"? Was this just another tactic to smooth things over? Or was there something bigger at play? For now, all Marcus could do was wait. Over the next few days, life seemed to move in slow motion. For Marcus, he continued applying for jobs, though his heart wasn't fully in it. His mind kept drifting back to the meeting, the intensity of Richard's gaze, the weight of his words. It was as if the CEO saw something in him that others hadn't noticed before. Meanwhile, the public outcry surrounding Marcus's firing showed no signs of slowing down. Skyline Airlines' social media pages were flooded with comments demanding justice. Passengers canceled flights, vowing not to fly with the airline until they apologized and reinstated Marcus. Even major news outlets began speculating about whether the company would face legal consequences for their handling of the situation. Behind the scenes, Richard Langley was working tirelessly to address the crisis. He called an emergency meeting with his executive team, presenting them with two options: ignore the backlash and risk further damage to the company's reputation, or take bold action to show the world that Skyline Airlines valued compassion as much as efficiency. We can't afford to lose trust, Richard told his team firmly. This is our chance to turn a negative into a positive, to prove that we're willing to adapt and grow. After hours of debate, the executives reached a decision. They drafted a plan that would not only rectify the injustice done to Marcus, but also set a new standard for how the company approached customer service and employee conduct. But Richard knew this wouldn't be enough. He wanted to make a statement that would resonate far beyond the confines of the airline industry. The following week, Marcus received an email from Skyline Airlines inviting him to attend a press conference, hosted by none other than Richard Langley himself. The subject line read, "Your presence is requested." Confused but intrigued, Marcus accepted the invitation. On the day of the event, Marcus arrived at the venue, a grand auditorium packed with reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers. As he took his seat near the front row, whispers rippled through the crowd. Everyone wanted to know why Marcus Johnson, the baggage handler who had been fired for helping a disabled passenger, was here today. When Richard Langley walked onto the stage, the room fell silent. Dressed in a sharp suit, he looked every bit the powerful CEO, but there was a warmth in his demeanor that caught Marcus off guard. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, his voice clear and commanding, "today marks a turning point for Skyline Airlines. Over the past week, we've listened carefully to your concerns, and we've learned some hard truths about ourselves. One truth stands above the rest. Kindness should never come at a cost." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "In light of these lessons, I am pleased to announce that Marcus Johnson has been offered, and has graciously accepted, a leadership role within our company. Starting immediately, he will serve as Director of Customer Compassion, overseeing initiatives designed to prioritize empathy and humanity in everything we do." The audience erupted into applause, and Marcus sat frozen in disbelief. Him? A director? It felt surreal, yet somehow perfect. Richard concluded by addressing Marcus directly. "Mr. Johnson, thank you for reminding us what truly matters. Your courage has inspired change, not just within our company, but across industries worldwide." As Marcus rose to join Richard on stage, he realized this was more than a second chance. It was a chance to rewrite the rules and inspire others to follow their hearts. This section shifts the narrative toward resolution while introducing a surprising twist that propels Marcus into a position of influence. Readers are engaged by the emotional payoff and the promise of meaningful change. Stepping into his new role as Director of Customer Compassion, Marcus felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The title sounded impressive, but he couldn't help wondering if he was truly ready for such responsibility. After all, just weeks ago he'd been loading luggage onto planes, not leading corporate initiatives. Still, the overwhelming support from strangers, colleagues, and even the CEO himself gave him confidence that he could rise to the occasion. His first task was to meet with Skyline Airlines' leadership team to discuss how they could embed empathy into every aspect of their operations. Richard Langley had made it clear that Marcus's perspective would guide these changes, and the executives were eager to hear his ideas. As Marcus entered the conference room on his first day, he noticed the curious glances from those seated around the table. Some looked skeptical, others intrigued, but none dismissive. "Welcome, Marcus," Richard said warmly, gesturing for him to take a seat at the head of the table. "We're here because you've already proven that compassion isn't just an ideal, it's a necessity. Tell us where we should start." Marcus took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts before speaking. "Thank you, everyone, for trusting me with this opportunity. I think the key is simple. We need to put people first, our passengers, our employees, and our communities. That means rethinking policies that prioritize rules over humanity." He went on to outline several proposals, including mandatory training sessions for staff on empathetic customer service, creating flexible protocols for assisting passengers with special needs, and establishing an anonymous feedback system so employees could report concerns without fear of retaliation. Each suggestion was met with nods of approval, though some executives raised practical questions about implementation. One senior manager, Ms. Patel, spoke up cautiously. "These are great ideas, Marcus, but how do we balance them with operational efficiency? We can't afford to compromise safety or punctuality." Marcus nodded, understanding her concern. "I'm not suggesting we abandon structure altogether. Instead, let's create space for judgment calls when circumstances demand it. For example, what if supervisors had discretion to approve exceptions like mine without fearing repercussions? It's about empowering employees to make decisions based on compassion while staying within guidelines." The room fell silent as everyone considered his words. Finally, Richard broke the silence. "I agree with Marcus. Empowerment starts at the top. From now on, managers will be evaluated not only on performance metrics, but also on how well they foster a culture of kindness. Over the next few weeks, Marcus threw himself into his work, collaborating with teams across departments to bring his vision to life. He traveled to different airports, meeting frontline workers and listening to their stories. Many shared experiences, similar to his own, moments where rigid rules had clashed with human needs, and expressed gratitude for finally being heard. Word of Marcus's efforts spread quickly, both inside and outside the company. Passengers began noticing subtle yet meaningful changes in how they were treated. Employees reported feeling more valued and motivated, knowing their voices mattered. Slowly but surely, Skyline Airlines started earning back the trust it had lost. But Marcus knew the journey wasn't over. Change took time, and there would always be challenges ahead. Still, he found solace in the knowledge that he was making a difference, not just for himself, but for countless others who deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. As he reflected on how far he'd come, Marcus realized something profound. Sometimes, life gives you lemons not to make lemonade, but to plant a whole orchard. This section highlights Marcus's growth and impact as he steps into his new role, showcasing his ability to inspire meaningful change. Readers remain engaged through emotional depth and relatable themes of perseverance and transformation. Months passed, and Marcus's influence at Skyline Airlines continued to grow. Under his leadership, the company underwent a remarkable transformation. Passengers frequently praised the airline for its improved service, noting how employees went above and beyond to ensure their comfort and safety. Employees, too, felt empowered to act with kindness without fear of punishment, a shift that boosted morale and fostered a sense of unity throughout the organization. One evening, as Marcus prepared to leave the office, he received an unexpected email. The subject line read, "Thank you, Marcus." Curious, he opened it and found a heartfelt message from Mrs. Evelyn Harper, the elderly woman whose wheelchair he had pushed months earlier. Her words brought tears to his eyes. "Dear Marcus, I've been following your journey since our paths crossed that rainy day at the airport. What you did for me wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a reminder of what humanity should look like. Seeing how far you've come inspires me every day. Please know that you've changed more lives than you'll ever realize, including mine. Thank you for being brave enough to do what was right." Marcus sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by emotion. He realized that his actions, both big and small, had created ripples far beyond what he could have imagined. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the countless people who now felt seen, valued, and cared for because of the changes he'd helped implement. The following week, Marcus was invited to speak at a global aviation conference. Standing on stage before hundreds of industry leaders, he shared his story, not just the challenges he faced, but also the lessons he learned along the way. "Compassion isn't a weakness," he said firmly, his voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in his chest. "It's a strength. When we choose to put people first, we don't just improve their lives, we transform our own." His speech earned a standing ovation, and afterward, dozens of attendees approached him to express their admiration. Some even asked for advice on implementing similar initiatives within their own organizations. For Marcus, this was proof that change was possible, not just within one company but across entire industries. Back home, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since that fateful day at the airport. Losing his job had been devastating, but it had also opened doors he never thought possible. He often wondered if he would have discovered his true potential without facing adversity head-on. Now, as Director of Customer Compassion, he carried the weight of responsibility with pride, knowing he was shaping a brighter future for others. One evening, while walking through the terminal where it all began, Marcus stopped to watch a young baggage handler assist a family struggling with heavy luggage. The employee smiled warmly, offering words of encouragement as he guided them to their gate. In that moment, Marcus felt a surge of hope. This was his legacy, not fame or recognition, but the knowledge that acts of kindness could inspire others to do the same. As he turned to leave, Richard Langley appeared beside him, clapping him lightly on the shoulder. "You've done good work, Marcus," he said with genuine respect. "The world is better because of you." Marcus smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Life had taken him on an unexpected journey full of challenges and triumphs, heartbreak and healing. And though he knew there would always be room for growth, one thing was certain. Compassion had become the cornerstone of everything he stood for, and it always would be. This final section ties the story together, emphasizing Marcus's lasting impact and personal growth. Readers are left with a powerful message about the transformative power of kindness, ensuring the narrative ends on an uplifting and inspiring note.